Welcome to our Visionary Leadership discussion panel. We are so glad that you decided to join us, and we also want to thank our 4 fabulous panelists for joining us this evening. Before we get started, we just want to acknowledge our students for being here, for their participation in helping to put this event together. This is something that we started last year with our previous leadership class, and we thought this would be beneficial since throughout the quarter we discussed leadership topics and concepts, and we thought this would be a great idea to get our current leaders to come and speak with us to give us their perspective on what leadership means in their roles and their current leadership positions. So before we get started, we'd like to have Marcy come up and introduce to be here. So welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Hi, my name is Marcy Vassenpower. I am the Activity Director for JFKU University's Hispanic Undergraduate Success Center. Dr. Judy Castro is our Project Director, and I'm part of her team along with Dr. Pilar Egues Guevara, who's our Hispanic Academic Advisor, and Cynthia Martinez, who's our Administrative Coordinator. We're thrilled to be a sponsor of tonight's Visionary Leadership Forum because we share a common commitment to diversity and leadership. Being part of this event was just like a natural fit because it ties in with one of the objectives of our Title V Hispanic Serving Institution HSI grant that the university was awarded in October 2015 from the Department of Ed. Professional development for students, faculty, and staff is a key component of the grant. In particular, for our faculty and staff, professional development emphasizing both leadership and diversity will help enhance the classroom experience provided to our students. The synergy with tonight's event and the forum and our HSI grant objectives are aligned with the university's diversity statement, which embodies a living culture of diversity. It goes on to state, we recognize that a diverse school environment is one that supports the academic community in gaining the awareness, knowledge, and skills to work effectively with all people. The Hispanic Undergraduate Success Center team invites you to enjoy this evening's panel and visit the center and the university's website at jfku.edu to learn more about the services we provide to our students and our community. Our ribbon cutting ceremony is going to be July 20th. We would love to have you join us. Thanks again for inviting us tonight.
Great, thank you, Marcy. Before we get started, I'd like to do a little icebreaker. So I have a question for the audience. What is the appropriate side for our name tags when we're at a networking event? Does anyone know? What's the appropriate side?
Right. So when you extend your hand, you can read it.
Ah, exactly. That is correct. It is the right side. So when you are extending your hand at a networking event, they're actually looking at your name tag. We thought of that question last year because that's something that we don't usually think about when it comes to networking. And so usually we either have it on the left or the right, but no one really tells us which is the appropriate side. So it's always the right side, so as you're extending your hand. So Chris, that is very correct. So thank you. I got a fun question for you all. How many games did the Warriors win this past season? There you go, Tracy. For the ones who answered the question correctly on the first time. So good luck to them. So awesome. Thank you, everyone. So let's go ahead and get started. And I will just read you a quick bio if you haven't had an opportunity to hear about our panelists. Our first panelist is we have our own president, Miss Deborah Bean. She is the first female president of John F. Kennedy in his first 50 years. Deborah has held management positions in the field of media, online brand development for clients such as American Airlines, MSNBC.com, Nike, the Chicago Tribune, and the University of Chicago. Our next panelist we have is Ms. Barbara Simmons. She is the Chief of Staff of Northern California Business Information Office for Kaiser Permanente IT. Barbara's role includes the Portfolio Management Office and a $60 million project portfolio for Kaiser Permanente IT. Jag Oh, I'm so sorry. I knew I was.
Just bring it.
Just wing it. Run. Jag Randawa.
There you go.
Oh. Is a technology executive, venture capital advisor, a professional speaker, and an award-winning author of the book, The Bright Idea Box. So thank you for joining us, Jag. And our final panelist we have is Mr. Donald Ellison. He is the Director of HR and Payroll for San Francisco Metropolitan Transportation Agency, otherwise known as MUNI. That's a short phrase there. As the HR professional, Donald has over 30 years of generalist and organizational development experience. His expertise includes development of programs in management for all aspects of HR, labor relations, and personnel management. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'd like to go ahead and get started by asking our panelists, and I will throw out our first question to our president, is asking, Deborah, what is your definition of what constitutes as a leader?
You know, whether you're leading your family or your hiking group or a department or a large organization, I think all leaders are tasked with moving that organization forward. Things are always in motion, things are always going forward, but how does one lead so that whether it's an organization, a family, or a hiking group, that it's the best that it can be, that it feels that it's supported and that the group itself supports the members of the group. So if you talk about leadership broadly, I think we see leadership in every place, in every way that we do, and for aspiring leaders, you can find ways to practice your leadership, to consider leadership in every way that you go forward during the day.
Great, thank you, Deborah. Ms. Simmons, how would you define leadership?
I think I would echo Deborah's sentiment with regard to moving things forward. I think that's key for leading, and I somehow feel like this is, okay, there we go. I didn't bring it closer. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, perfect. But I'll also add that I think it has to do with taking risk. As a leader, you're often out front, and people have to feel comfortable that they can move ahead, even when it's not clear and it's a bit murky. Decisions aren't always solid. It's incumbent upon leaders to take the degree of risk that's necessary to be out front so that people can find a way to face those challenges. So I think that I would define as leadership, and that piggybacks on what Deborah said. It's how you move those teams or those families or your hiking group or any group of people.
Great, thank you. And Donald, how would you define that?
Ditto. No. At least I'm not last. Anyway, and I agree with the previous two panelists. One of the things I can hear myself. One of the things I would add is leaders expect to have vision, and help the agency or the company develop the vision on where they need to go. And one of the things that I say, once you establish that vision, the leader needs to understand or learn what their staff's capabilities are. In order to move forward, you need to know your staff weaknesses and strengths so that you can help them and the agency achieve their particular vision and the goal of that agency.
Great, thank you. And Jag?
All I can say is I'm not that smart to define leadership. But I'll share something very personal that I guess I learned the hard way. No matter how smart you are, how good you are at it, there's only so much you can do with your two hands and one brain. And remember that lesson. And if you want to get somewhere, do something grand, you need other people to help you achieve that. So I guess leadership is that art of motivating, persuading people toward a common goal or mission, no matter what that is in a family situation, a friendship situation, whatever that happened to be, or an organizational situation. It is the art of moving people toward a common goal.
Great, thank you, Jag. I definitely agree with our panelists that definitely leadership also takes motivation. And we also had talked in class about the different styles of leadership. And one of the important things that we learn is that we develop our own style through our own belief or something we're passionate about. And so I'd like to ask our panelists about in what ways have you used your leadership roles and responsibilities to introduce change, drive growth, or build a strong team, promote collaboration, community engaged, or avert cynicism and cultivate trust. That's something that's huge in organizations and that we've learned throughout the quarter is that building trust is so important. So I'd like to ask one of our panelists and ask Donald to start off with the discussion about how do you help to build trust in an organization?
Okay, thank you. I shouldn't have made my comment earlier. Now I'm going to have to go first. Well, and I was thinking about when I came into the organization where I came from. I had left an organization that was completely different. I don't want to say the organization I left. And one of the things with that particular organization, there was a lot of disjointment. There were decisions that were made more on relationship than business needs. So therefore, people weren't sure what they were trying to do, what the agents were trying to do. It became more of an emotional decision. And one of the things that my thoughts were simply that if you do this, you're going to have to come with a thought process to let people understand where you're coming from. One of the things to do that is to make a connection. Try to develop a relationship with the people around you. When I came into this new organization, one of the things I did, and I wanted to say I have a former employee here, and you can check all this check the box and make sure I won't call her out. She can raise her hand. Is developing a relationship with your people and communicating with them. And one of the things I did is actually I met with, and I had quite a large staff, is to give them. I basically told them I'm going to interview each of you, try to understand so they can understand where I'm coming from and where I wanted to go. Also, I'm listening to where they're coming from and where they want to go. And part of that is how you develop a relationship can help people move forward, that they have confidence in you as far as your honesty, your integrity, and your willingness to, come off of I'm going to make this statement, come off of your high horse and talk to them. I think that's very important.
Great, thank you.
And I'll add something to that building of trust. It took me, I won't even tell you how many years to learn about this notion of building trust. Because often roles in organizations and in leadership are given based on performance. And so you often see the same type of person moving in the leadership trajectory. And it's people who are high performers, people who are drivers that deliver consistently. And so when you move into leadership, all that you did to get there changes. It's almost like clothes you had, that dress you loved from 19-something that I won't say out loud, that just doesn't work anymore. It's a new time, you need new clothes, you need things different. Leadership requires something different. And so the building of trust is really about first listening, so that you understand what motivates and what's important to people on the other side of the table. And that slows you down if you're a driver or high performer. So it took me a while to learn that because I tend to be high energy. And then the other notion is being authentic. And that I think you touched on, where each leader has their own style. People often aren't sure when you're moving from this sort of individual contributor, high performer to a leadership role. You're often trying to mimic others because you're so unsure of the things that are in front of you. And being able to demonstrate behaviors that are authentic, that are, sincere, is really important to building trust, because people see through that if you don't. So for me, I'm a risk taker, so that's the mode in which I move. So people view me as a risk taker, but they also view me as strong. There are people who don't take risk as readily, and they shouldn't if they're not comfortable doing that. So I think being your authentic, comfortable self is important, and listening so you know how to respond to others.
Great, thank you.
I think those are two incredibly important parts. Listening is key, I think, for any leader, and being authentic is important. And for me, as I moved through different leadership positions, really understanding my values and what was important to me as a leader made a difference. And part of it made a difference is because as a leader, you're often put in situations where you're asked to respond, where you need to respond to questions or comments, or really even help the group understand their dynamic. And so you really need to, without cataloging or going through it or have to think, gee, what are my values? You really have to know it so that you can respond and lead others. And I think, to me, that's one of the greatest advantages of taking time to reflect on who you are and what that means when you're in those situations. And then always knowing that as a leader, you're responsible to consider your actions and to reflect on how successful you think you were in a particular situation so that you're continuously improving. Because I think that's a hallmark of someone that begins to build trust. Mm-hmm. If you're willing also to say that you made a mistake or take responsibility for that, own up to your responsibilities, and also then cast what you've learned from there. That's another way to build trust, so that people know that you're going to be honest with them, and that's important to me as I go forward.
Great, thank you. Great. So I'd like.
I can add anything, so I'll let you.
So great. I'm going to open this up for any one of our panelists to tell us, how have you evolved as a leader in the last 5 years? And if you can share with us any challenges that you have faced throughout your time in your leadership position.
I'll dive in first, I guess, since I'm on this end, and we'll let you go next, Jack. Get a pass here. It's interesting that you said that 5 years. So I joined Kaiser about maybe 5.5 years ago, actually. And I started as a project manager in the organization. And it was kind of a gnarly project. And my first lens was, what is this place? And I need a different job. And it sort of evolved into another role about 20 months later, where I was doing more process improvement and helping the organization to mature its project management capabilities. And then that subsequently evolved into a chief of staff role, and me managing our operations and business management, and all things finance, HR, compliance. And then that evolved into me managing our portfolio management office and about 55 people. So over the last 5 years, it was a very steep trajectory of growth. I was very challenged when I moved that quickly through the organization. It wasn't my first leadership role or responsibility, but it moved so fast in an organization of that size. I had to go back to what I said before about the things that got me there weren't enough, because when you're a performer, you're trying to keep a handle on a lot of things, and trying to control a lot of things. And I think Deborah pointed out this need to catalog things that you have, where you think you can get more detail before you move. When you have large teams, you don't get that kind of time, and you don't get that kind of detail. So for me, evolving as a leader was really learning to delegate quickly, assessing people's talents, as Donald pointed out, and being very clear about what you can offload to others so that they grow and develop, and really investing more energy in growing and developing people. I do have 2 boys, so I got to reach into the grab bag and rely on some of those skills, because it's very much the same type of skill where you learn to let people grow and do things and make mistakes. But you put some guardrails in place, because you don't want them to end up with stitches, but you got to let them make some mistakes so that they can take on more of those responsibilities and you can broaden your scope. So I think for me, that was something that I had to develop very quickly, and that was probably a big evolution for me over the last 5 years.
And you start looking at me afterwards.
That's right. That's right.
Right, I'll share my story. And I'll only start with this, that 5 years ago, if you would have seen me, I don't think, you know, you would have considered who I am today or the portfolio or whatever the bio I have today. It's very different, very, very different situation. We almost went under. Our company went under after 2008 financial crisis. We sold half of our business, had to cut my budget by about 38%. That's a huge, huge cut. And most people will quit when they had to kind of cut their budget with that kind of like sums. And somehow, I don't know what crossed my mind. I was like, you know, that's a like great learning opportunity. And I have no idea, don't ask me where that epiphany came from, but it just somehow felt like a challenge, and being the engineer mind is that, no, I gotta solve it. And through that crisis, I mean, there's one stage after doing the layoffs and all that, one of the challenge I had was like, okay, how do I do more with less? Because now the people are gone, the resources are gone, but the work is not. And I started reading a lot, and I came across this interesting story of a Brazilian company that calls their employees innovators. And they make them sign an innovators pledge that I'll be on the lookout for ideas to grow the company. I started asking my team that, and just out of the blue. That just went viral. I mean, the kind of things my team did are just out of their own sheer interest, out of their own desire, and also the fact that somebody's actually asking for help. Totally transformed the company. And when the CEO saw the effects, I said, you know, why can't you do something on the company level? So that's how the book I wrote about is creating a bottom-up innovation culture came about. And last year, CEO took me out for lunch and asked me, have you ever considered being the CEO of the company? This is something I would have never even dreamed of 5 years ago, or even considered. I mean, that's the path I want to be. I'm an engineer. That's what I do. I solve problems. And but that led me to the people skill learning path, and became passionate about behavioral science, psychology, and that.
Okay, thank you. One of our panelists would like to chime in.
There's always so much to learn, and that is a really wonderful story, so it's hard to follow. I think it goes to something that as I've been in academic leadership for 14 years now, and I think one of the strengths is that it's important for leaders, and it goes back to our last question, building trust. It's important to have an understanding of what you need to know in order to help lead people. So whether you're an engineer or whether you're in project management, you have to also really know your discipline and who you are, so you have something to offer in addition to the leadership that you have. So one way that I've grown as a leader over the last 14 years is to go from being an adjunct faculty person to being in 14 years of academic administration, and also pursuing my doctorate in educational leadership, to really understand what it means to be at a university. And through that, I've had a lot of help in addition to that, with mentors and people sharing with me, and really exchanging knowledge in a variety of ways. I'll teach you about communication, you teach me about academic administration. So really doing everything I can to have as deep an understanding of what is really my professional field, or became my professional field, so that when you're working with teams who are there having their ideas and their input, that you're able to work with them and share your ideas and your experiences to help an organization go forward. forward. So becoming a president of a university, I'm very honored to be president of John F. Kennedy University, and I'm just about to come up on my first year of being president. So when I came to John F. Kennedy, I said, this is a year of knowing, which echoes back to our conversation about listening. I want to know about you. I want you to know about me. How can we be open to knowing about each other so we can craft a vision for the institution going forward? One of the things as you move up in leadership, as we've been talking a little bit about here, you have to find ways in which you get feedback, because when people are reporting to you, they're not necessarily going to let you know when they think what you're doing doesn't fit what they think they're going to do. So you can live in a bubble, if you would, to let yourself about everyone loves you, it's all rosy, and every decision you make is fabulous. And it's not, no matter who you are. So it's important to find ways to get authentic feedback about your performance, to find ways in which you ask people to share with you what they think, to have colleagues outside of your organization that you can bounce ideas of, to have colleagues inside of your organization that you can build a level of trust, because reflection and really understanding your strengths and weaknesses and how you improve is a way to make your institutions go forward. And as president, for me, that's been key, is to not listen always. You know, we always hope we're doing a fabulous job, but not always listen and look for other ways to gauge your success and other ways to get real feedback.
And for me, and the timing is perfect, I've actually been working for, I'm not supposed to say MUNI, San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, for the last 5 years. And one of the things that I always prided myself in was saying I could lead the heck out of a human resource process. I had that skill down, and one of the things that I had to do within the last 5 years, the agency itself was going through a culture change. We were actually decided we're going to do a major culture change, that 3 to 5 year process in a culture change. So I had to move from an HR leader to a business leader to a change leader, and so therefore my skill sets, some of them could work towards that, but others I had to look at particular new skill sets. And one of the things that we got out of this particular process was a coach, someone you could reflect your ideas and your concepts and your thought processes as an executive through this change process. And a couple of real good learnings from that process is, one, I am an excellent chaos manager. When things go bad, Don Ellison's right there. Within a certain amount of time, it's done. And the learning process is, why are you in chaos? Are you not planning, or what is causing you to be in chaos? And so therefore, the agency issue bigger than me, but the issue is how, as a change in business leader, we're going to work our way through that. So therefore, I had to become a business leader and executive across the board, a little broader than my comfort zone within HR. And so there was, learnings there. And another one for me, and this came straight from my coach, was delegation. Again, I'm a chaos manager. Things goes bad, it would be, I take it, put it up under my wings, and I'm running with it. So the learning for me and the feedback from this coach was, why don't you delegate? My answer was, I know what my staff is doing. They're already overworked. There's no room for them to delegate. And his response to me is, well, why don't you give it to them and let them tell you, ouch. Let them inform you that it's too much for them instead of you making that decision for them. And that was a real big learning for me, because that's opposite the way I've been doing things. And so that was a real growth issue for me. And I have to admit, I had to tell my coach, it's working. My staff is willing to take that on versus me having to carry that. They're actually asking me, why are you doing this? Why don't you give it to me? So again, major learning within the last 5 years.
Great, thank you. In listening to that, I've taken notes and heard about authentic feedback, ways to give feedback, to reflect, what you need to do to address as who you are. And it just made me think of this question. One of the things that we discussed in our class was how leaders take feedback, whether solicited or unsolicited. And getting that criticism, whether we want it or not. What has been, or if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, what is one hard or tough criticism that you may have received, and how did you react to that, or how did you grow from receiving that type of criticism?
Ooh, I got a few. Which one was the hardest? Oh, I guess probably the hardest one, I think, was people giving me feedback on how I engage. And the feedback was really about if it's not something that's important to me or something of interest to me, they note my disengagement. And so that was probably the hardest feedback I got, because it made me aware that I am projecting that what is important to others is not important to me. And you get a reciprocating response if you project that. So that was probably the toughest feedback for me. And it also taught me what I needed to do differently. So when we get the feedback, we then have to respond to it. Interestingly enough, when you get feedback, you don't always have an answer immediately on how to fix it. That was one of me multitasking, at least I thought I was, and probably not doing too great a job of it. So it goes back to the delegating. It goes back to removing some things from your plate so that you can engage and so that you can be in the moment. And often with leaders, there are about 500 things that are on your plate and about 500 issues that require your attention, but you have to be in the moment. And I think Deborah touched on something that is also really important, and that's balance. So leaders all have different styles, but they are very deliberate, I think is the word she used. And so as you move in leadership, you need to be deliberate in your actions, and how you speak, what you project physically, how people come away from you feeling is very important. And so that was probably a hard lesson for me that required me to shift a lot of things that I wasn't aware of.
Great. Thank you. Any one of our panelists would like to share?
I vote Jag.
I hate you. See, we're friends.
Fast friends.
It goes a long way.
Smart man.
It's passion either way, right? No bad PR.
I can say like I'm the I criticize myself a lot. Perhaps the harshest feedback or criticism that I gotten is from myself, and good and bad. One is that there's that constant drive to be better, but at times I've found myself putting myself down, and that's something that I'm working on. I mean, that's something that I need to improve. Not to be so hard on myself. I mean, my wife will. I have responsibility of doing dishes at night, and I love that task just because it gives me time. I'm getting something done, and at the same time, I'm reflecting on things. And she'll catch me talking to myself, and she hates it, and I hate it when she interrupts me. So I don't have any good advice that you know how to stop self-sabotaging yourself. But every now and then stop and congratulate yourself too.
Definitely.
One, all the criticisms, and there are so many. I am, and I really mean this, blessed to be in a world of shared governance, and not all organizations are like that, but in an area of shared governance with universities are built around, it is incumbent, and it is the culture to share ideas, to ask for ideas, to take consideration, to communicate, to do that. And there are different points of view at a university, and it's important that those points of view, whether it's students, faculty, staff, and administrators, all be considered. And so in that, I think I've grown used to the notion that we all have different points of view, and that I will get feedback back from any one of those groups that maybe what I'm thinking or how I'm going about it isn't the way that others are perceiving that. I appreciate that because it is the culture. It makes it as though feedback to the president doesn't feel like a criticism. It feels like a dialogue and engagement, and that's at times, of course, all of us are, would like to get up in the morning and just go straight through what you think, but actually it brings a very rich environment, and it makes us consider decisions, and I appreciate that. And there's an openness and a willingness to sit with differences of opinion and difference of perspective, and I relish that in academia, and it's one of the reasons that I'm here. When people are letting you know that they have a criticism, I really haven't had it be because they don't mean the best for you. I think one of the things as a leader, it's important to have a culture of assuming best intentions, and that's one way to lead. By assuming best intentions, if you get a criticism or a comment, you assume the person's motivated from sincerity, and you take that to heart. So I think try and have a sense of humor. Don't take yourself too seriously, but listen to what people have and move through it in a way that hopefully makes you better and those you work with better.
Exactly.
I was going to say so many. Well, one of the things that I thought about is to talk about a criticism that made me change my behavior, which is, I think, modified the way I do business. When I came into the new organization, my style, just set the content, my style is you give me an assignment, I'll tell you when it's done, or I'll inform you when it's done. But I happen to be working for a boss who's data-driven. And I would get these feedback in meetings, he would make these comments, I'm not getting the information I need back from certain people, and I'm listening to that, and everybody says, he's talking about you. Nah, he couldn't be talking about me, because I'm gonna get it done. But one of the things that finally, he pulls me aside and he says, Don, it was a project, it was a very high profile one. He says, well, where are you with this? And I started to go, I got this done. He says, that I got this done. And he says, well, I need to know what's going on. I said, you gave me this assignment, I'll get it done. And he says, well, but I don't know that. How do I know where you are and what you're doing? My response was, just give me the assignment, I'll get it done within the time frame you asked. But he goes, how do I know? And so his needs were, my boss' needs were, he wanted to be updated. He wanted to know where we were all in a particular project. I had to modify my style to say that I had to slow down, take the time and provide updates, whereas that's not who I was, but is what the agency, what my boss needed. So I had to modify my behavior based on that, I'll call it criticism.
Great, thank you. As leaders, we're always dealing with different changing things at quick, fast, immediate time, especially where either we are planning for it or where if it's unplanned. As a leader, how do you deal with change, and how do you deal with helping your staff or individuals manage and deal with change? Because all of us, we're never used to it, we don't like it, but as leaders we still have to put our best foot forward in how to manage that. So how, as a leader, do you deal with change and help your staff to deal with it as well?
I'll take it on.
Go, Jack.
Yeah. You'll pay for it. Okay, she's next.
I got your back.
Thank you. The IT people here.
Exactly, right?
Change is an inevitable part of life, and every business goes through change. Change has become kind of the new norm. Often I will say, what is, if you go back to the last decade, and what has changed? What has changed in your business? You have people come up with all kinds of answers, technology, social media, blah, 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 this and that. But you know what has changed? The pace of change itself. Things are changing so fast The technology that brought change yesterday is no longer there today. And the world and the expectations, everything is changing. So there are lots of external forces that are driving change. So just get used to that change. That's just, accept it. That's part of your responsibility to manage change. Now the second aspect is nobody likes to be changed. Nobody likes a change forced upon them. So you have to bring people with you. You have to convince them that this change is important to the organization and this change is important to them. How does that change or lack of that change impacts the organization and you as the contributor or someone performing a certain role within that organization? And what that, I forgot the quote that, people change all the time, right? We all get married, we have kids. These are big changes. We move to different cities, we decide to enroll in school. These are big changes. We do it on our own. But often we resist when somebody tells you, like, hey, we used to do this way, now we're going to do that way. Why? Because somebody's dictating this change. And you're all going to be in that role someday where you're going to have to say, okay, we need to change. And the only way to successfully drive change is bring people inside. Tell them what's the rationale behind that? Why you need to do that? Convince them. That's part of leadership.
Yeah, I think I'll add to what you said, Jag, in that leaders have a real accountability to provide a line of sight. So people in an organization have different roles, they have different responsibilities, and they're always trying to understand how what they do fits into the bigger picture. So to your point on the role of the leader is to really provide the transparency and the clarity for how each person on the team, like, I'm a big football person, I just love football. My kids play football, and much to their chagrin, I know probably quite a bit about it. So I'm usually that mom that's yelling from the stand, stop dancing in the backfield, hit the hole. But leaders have a real responsibility to understand all of the players and the role that they play, and helping players understand the roles they play. So in the organization, if you do that, when things change, what happens for people most immediately, and for us, we're human, is we want to understand what this means for me. I hear the organization is changing. I know we have to do something different. What does that mean for me? What does that mean for my job? What does that mean for my security? And leaders have a responsibility to communicate early, often, and with clarity what those changes mean. And the more they do that, the more that people can move to a place of comfort. Jag is right. Nobody likes to be changed. It's always hard, but there are things that leaders can do to help ease that a little bit. And there'll always be some people who just won't move. They just don't like change, and they'll make some decisions to do something else. But if you provide that clarity and people have a line of sight so they know what it means for them, then it's a little easier for them to adjust.
And thank you, Barbara, for taking everything I was going to say. No, it's so good. So one of the things, again, and what she talked about, change creates anxiety. And that's a natural outcome of change. And one of the things you have to do, as she talked about, is communicate with them. One thing I wanted to add is one of the things that happens when you go through change with people in the organization, their incumbents are waiting for it to fail. They'll tell you stories that you try to make a change before, and we're back to the way we're doing business. They're anticipating that it's going to fail. And one of the things you have to do with a leader through your communication is keep it up front, keeping them updated in this particular change process, and let them understand that it's moving forward. Because without that, they're going to be saying, wait 2 years. Wait 6 months and it'll go away. So therefore, you need to keep communicating. You need to manifest and show that that change has value through your leadership style and through your communication. Keep it moving, letting your staff, letting the agency know, letting the company know that this is here to stay. It's not going to fail, so you need to move forward with this, or you need to get off the bus.
You know, I am a real fan of change leadership and change modeling. So I want to mention John Cotter and his philosophy on change management. And I would suggest he has many books out there, and I would like you, as the students are here, to consider looking at those. And I'm going to talk just briefly about that. I had an opportunity to lead a change process last year, implementing a new academic technology system for National University, and it was incumbent on us that be a success. So, and it's successful in a period of time. And so I really spent a lot of time reading, and I think we've talked a little bit about that, how being a lifelong learner never stops as we look towards all these challenges that face us on a daily basis. So Cotter has this wonderful, I wrote it down here on this paper because I want to just talk about the 6 things that he calls out, and you can follow up on those, but maybe even hearing them help. One is, increase the urgency. There's always a reason for change and a benefit and an outcome to change. And as Jag said, and Barbara said, and Donald said, nobody wants to change. But if you can change it or shift the paradigm from talking about change to benefit, you can help people see the vision to get to the next place. And if you make people understand why it's urgent, and all change is urgent, or we'll just sort of plod along and change will come more organically. But in any projects, or at this university, we have change modeling here at John F. Kennedy University. What do we need to do, and how are we going to get there? And then you have to build the team. That's the second tenet. So who is it that are going to be on your team or a cross-functional team that's going to help you get it done, but also understand the vision and also help you get the vision right? How is it you have a vision, we have to make this change, but really what does that mean, and how can we articulate that vision? And as Jag said early on, it's not just one person that has to understand that and carry that load. It has to be disseminated across an organization, and you need leaders and change agents to help you, and you do that by building your team and then helping them fine-tune the vision for you. And then as you move through that, you have to go to communication, informally and formally, so everyone hears it and sees it, and it's not just in the rumor mill of an organization. And then you have to empower action and recognize short-term goals. As we're moving forward, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but you also have to celebrate those victories. That's one of, if I were to reflect back on that other question about criticisms, I like to move ahead, and I've had to learn, and I've learned it through feedback, to stop and celebrate the moment, celebrate the victories, understand that those milestones are important to everyone, and not just go, oh yeah, we did that, on to the next. So celebrate the small victories as well as the big victories in order to move forward. Don't let up, don't stop talking about it. Don't think you've said it enough, that you've met enough, that you've listened to people enough. Never stop. You'll get resistance. Resistance will be part of that 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but never give up. And then when you make the change, when the change comes, remember you made that change, celebrate that change, and stick to the change. Understand it. This is the new way of doing business. This is the new process, however big or little change you are. So that's really a shortcut to what he says. He has a wonderful book, Heart of Change, which I think is really wonderful because it does incorporate heart into a change management process. And I've learned a lot from studying John Cotter.
Great, thank you. So as we're continuing our discussion with leaderships, let's flip or change the mindset right now and talk about skills and what are required for leaders to have skills and competencies. So what are some of the concrete steps that can be taken to develop leadership skills and competency and continue learning to be more of an effective leader? Jag, would you like to start us off?
I don't know if there is a skill. There's not a skill.
Okay.
I mean, it's a collage of skills, and different skills are needed at different time, different situations. And I guess the biggest thing that I can say is the aptitude for learning. My wife, she's a neuroscientist, and I've learned this word called efficacy, which I never knew before. But the scientists, that's their word. And personal efficacy, improvement. Like, am I better? Am I doing better? How can I be better? And you will be put into different situations. You will require different skills to handle those situations. And that's not the only opportunity you're going to get. You're going to get many, many opportunities like that. So that desire to be better next time. Because at that situation or that moment, there's only so much you can do. Now, if you ask me, okay, I am not in the leadership role, I want to be in the leadership role, what is the number one skill that comes up? Communication. Your ability to communicate your ideas to others and have a buy-in. And that's, I learned the hard way. I'll tell you the story another time, but I have an interesting story behind that as well. So.
There are many skills and there's many different styles, and we talked about authenticity. So for me, it's really personal reflection and continued study on how to be your best self to help lead others. I have an undergraduate degree in cultural anthropology, and I really am interested in people and people's interactions and cultural interactions. I love talking to people, all varieties of people. Anyone. I really enjoy talking to them. And so to me, that is a natural skill that I have, and it's something that I enjoy. And we're all in this for a long haul, right? We're all working and doing this for a long period of time. So if you find things that are skills that align with you, develop those skills. Consider how what you naturally enjoy doing can contribute to your leadership style. And I think that's gone a long way for me to give me energy. You know, we can never get more time, but hopefully we can get more energy. So, you know, really, I would say that's the other one. It's not about time management, it's about energy management and showing up with as much energy as you possibly can. And that is a whole probably panel in and of itself, but consider that. Consider what you like to do that gives you energy, how much sleep you get, you know, how much exercise do you get, how do you manage your life so that you show up every day to your role as the best person that you can be with as much energy and as much to give as you possibly can. So soft skills and hard skills.
Great.
Yeah, I think Jag said it earlier. Leaders are in the people business, regardless of your discipline, whether it's project management or education or engineering or neuroscience. You're in the people business when you're leading. So it becomes less about your domain knowledge, although you definitely want to have the aptitude for understanding because it gives you credibility. But you really have to be focused on what it takes to engage, inspire, motivate, and even course correct people. And it's really all about many things that it takes. And I think, as Deborah pointed out, to move people along and to drive change and progress. So.
Okay, one of the things, you know, was talking about competencies, and I guess fortunately, I'll say fortunately, my particular agency, we went through a 360 review process for the executive team. And I wrote these down just in case they would come in handy. And one of the things I wanted to read when you talk about competency, what the agency was looking for their leadership, what I am being evaluated by as far as a leader in this particular organization. And these were based on competencies that the agent came up with and some commitments we made as a manager. And these are general terms, but I think it relates directly to the question about what the competencies are. And I'll just read them. First one was coaching and developing others, displaying ownership and accountability, driving results, handling and resolving conflict, leading cross-divisional collaboration, leading the organizational culture, leveraging diversity, managing and facilitating change, organizational system thinking, strategic thinking and perspective, and visionary leadership. So as our agency, those are the things we decided were the core competencies for our executive team, and we were looking for, which would be at 360, my boss, my peers, which would be the fellow executives and consultants and contractors we work with, and then my direct reports. All had to use the scale to evaluate me. So we, as an executive team, can say, where are we weak in these competencies, where are we strong, so we can start developing them in order so that we can move the organization forward.
Great, great, thank you. And I'm going to save this last question, but what I'd like to do is kind of change it up a bit. And let's get some questions from our audience. So I'd like to pose questions. Are there any, based off our discussion on leadership that we've talked about tonight, what questions do you have for our panelists? Yes, sir.
You talked about being authentic.
You know, it show up at some point or the other. It will surface. And you're cheating yourself and you're cheating others, and your effectiveness starts to drop, and it starts to show up in your performance. Because again, like, you know, we send an energy. As a leader, we send out that energy. And if you're not behind some initiative or any activity, project, whatever that you're taking on, you don't have that energy. You don't have that enthusiasm. You don't bring people to the center all the time because you yourself are not there. And it shows up. And our results are often mediocre, I would say. And so I don't know if you can really persuade yourself, because again, there's a lot of scientific literature available that says that the willpower can only go so far. So often what you're doing when you're doing something against you, you're using your willpower. I can do it. I I don't really want to, but I can do it. And this is a really interesting study that shows that willpower actually decreases your IQ and your decision-making abilities. And literally, there are lots of scientific papers proving that. And I will not go into the details, but yes, in your project or activities that you undertake, the results starts to show that, you're not doing a good job. So I recommend, if you're ever in that situation, have an honest conversation with yourself and your supervisor and whoever else is putting you in that place, that, maybe perhaps you're not the best person to lead that.
I'll piggyback on that too, because it's an interesting notion to buy into change, especially in a corporate structure, because it's not always the most benevolent structure. What I have found over the course of my career is that I don't always have all the information. So oftentimes when I initially hear about an action and the words transformation, shift are used to say that something's going to be different in the organization structurally, which impacts jobs and people and things of that nature. So my first thought is often, I'm not sure. And I think part of leadership is investigative, is trying to understand the bigger picture. And it's sometimes not so much about you not buying into the change as much as you have to accept that there are larger considerations at stake, particularly when you talk about corporations and enterprises with hundreds of thousands of people working for them that have regulatory, finance, and other commitments and responsibilities. So I think from a leadership perspective, what is most difficult is how you reconcile that, because it's a business sometimes, and we care about people because we're human. But when you decide to work in an enterprise and a company, it's in business. So you're always trying to balance things, and often leaders will find themselves in situations where they're brokering. And it becomes a lot about that brokering, and it goes back to building the trust and communicating and how you show up and how you engage, because you're almost always brokering for something. So if your department is shrinking and you have talented people that you don't want to see walking out of the building with a box, then you're having conversations with someone else whose department is booming that might have some opportunities for the talent that you have in your organization. So leaders are thinking ahead in that way and trying to balance the dynamic. And I go back to, you're in the people business, trying to balance that dynamic of humanity and people with business outcomes. And so it's really a broad set of skills that Donald laid out that are really surfacing all the time. And so being dynamic is really a way that you handle these situations where you say, I don't know if I agree with that.
No, I want to talk about, yeah, there was a situation when actually was myself and my staff was asked to deliver information that we knew were entirely, it wasn't true at all. And the situation was simply this. I was with an organization, going back a little bit, where their claim to fame was they had never laid off anybody in 100 years. So we're in meetings talking about how eventually we're going to lay people off at some point. And they wanted my team to go out to and we were a state company, start talking about we've never laid anybody off in 100 years, which was, being dishonest. And so I had to take it upon myself as a leader of that group to say that, we're not going to deliver that message. That, I'm talking to the leaders who have decided that, just to try to convince them we're not going to deliver this message. I actually went to my team and said, we're not going to deliver this message. I'm not going to sit in a meeting talking about, a year from now we're going to be laying off people, selling to the staff that, oh, by the way, we've never laid off anybody. So then I had to decide, I was telling my staff at the time, they'll come for me. If this situation goes bad, I'm saying don't deliver that message, I'm taking the responsibility. So at that point I had to decide whether I was going to stick with this company or they were going to get rid of me, so which I thought was going to be the ultimate outcome, but I would not let my staff deliver that message. It turned out okay. I like telling the story. It was 5 o'clock, late. I get a call up to the executive floor to the vice president chief at that particular time, and I'm going, here it is. It's coming to roost, all that strong talk you were doing. And I walked in there and she says, Don, you're a great HR person. But we want you to learn the business side of it. So at that particular time, they said, we're going to send you, actually they're going to send me to MIT to their Sloan program to learn the business side of it. They actually appreciated the fact that I would not allow my staff to go there, but they wanted me to understand that, again, it's a business. As Barbara was saying, ultimately it's a business. And so therefore they wanted to, my stand was okay, but they wanted to give me a better perspective. But again, at that particular time, I had to decide if I could stay with that company or they were going to fire me.
I think both Barbara and Donald have very good stories, and I think I've been in both situations where you don't know everything you need to know, but it's important to be able to be in a position that you can speak to those people that you work for and give them your true opinion and why what they think maybe isn't going to work, and be willing to, from a moral point of view, take a stand. I was a long time ago in Chicago, president of a technology company, and they were bought out and they wanted to shut down 80 people and they wanted to do it before Christmas. And I said, no, we're not. It really came, they said, are you going to lay everyone off today? I said, no. And part of that conversation was, can we have another chance? Can we have another opportunity to build back? What would it look like if we did this differently? And we were able to, ultimately they did shut down that division, but to do it in a more ethical, responsible way, giving us an opportunity to move forward. And a lot of times, because I think we spoke about this earlier, you, as a leader, you have a responsibility to speak clearly to those that you report to, because they need to hear your point of view and the point of view of those that you manage. So a lot of it is learning to be able to speak their language, if it's going to business school, whatever their language is, and to be able to point out clearly to them, you know, what concerns you have about how they've laid off to you. And I've found that I have always been respected when I did that, and that it's made a difference. So you can't be afraid to speak out, and if you're afraid to speak out, then you do have to find a place where your opinion and your leadership is valued. So I think that is the other side of leadership. We've been talking about leadership, you know, how we lead those that follow us, but there's this other responsibility, whether it's to your bosses and to the public and to others that you speak. That is, I would say, about 50% of every leader's job is really how you communicate to those that yours. And everyone has a boss, whether it's a board of trustees, whether it's a public constituency. We all have people that care and have opinions and can affect how we do our work.
Great. Thank you. Are there any others? Yes, sir.
I have a question. What types of things did you do early on in your career to help prepare you for the leadership roles you have today?
Excellent question.
Well, I think many things prepare you for leadership. There's always this notion of whether leaders can be made or whether they're born. And I probably waffle on my view on that from month to month. But I think a lot of things that you can do early in your career, we talked about listening, we talked about the authenticity and the retrospectiveness of understanding who you are and your value. So those are key. Shadowing people. People talk a lot about mentorship, and mentorship's important because you find people who can give you guidance. But there is something that sometimes is missed, and that's sponsorship. So when you have an opportunity to have someone who's a sponsor, they do a little bit more for you than a mentor. They broker for you, and they create a way for you to have successes and visibility and all of those things. And so in the course of a career, sometimes that gets missed. And mentors are certainly, you can have many people that you learn from. Sponsors generally are somebody that can provide you with an opportunity to sort of practice what you learn. And I liken it to athletes, because I love football so much, who practice and they get on a team, but when a coach likes you, they give you a shot. And if you make a mistake, they put you back in. Sponsors do that for you because leaders make mistakes. But they have to recover from them. And so I think that's a really important thing to do early in your career, is understand that difference, and wherever you are, identify those people that can be sponsors for you.
I'll assure that they're made. Me!
It was already in there.
Great.
Okay, I'll share a story just to illustrate their point. I was very good technical, very good. I mean, you know, a handful of people wrote encryption algorithms in the early days and those kind of things. And everybody at work appreciated me. My bosses, the owners, the company, they loved me, absolutely loved me. I walk into office one day, and this is the days when you had the Outlook and it downloaded emails. Pre-internet, I mean the early internet days. And so I start my computer, emails start downloading. Here's an email from my boss titled promotion. You know, you all get excited, you know, you want it to be you, right? And especially, I mean, you know, if things have been good for you and you're appreciated, people like you, they give you great feedback, blah, blah. And you assume that's gotta be me, you know, but me, the favorite one. And you open that email and says, blah, blah, blah has been doing this great job, and we have given this opportunity, and it's a great opportunity. Please congratulate. And you're pissed. Because it's not you, right? And that happened to me. And that was, and literally. And that made me reflect that what is it that I don't have and that person has? especially somebody who was not as good as me or technically not even close to competent as I was at that time, that really made me kind of dig deeper. And it's trying to evaluate, like really kind of like trying to figure out, like, what is it? What do you need? What do you need to grow? And again, I stumbled across, I was a very poor communicator. And I started to observe myself. I started to notice that, okay, what is it about me? And really it was great that having that person, which I started to hate at that time, that what is it that he has and I don't? And I started to notice this quality, this communication, back to that fundamental thing. And that person can communicate, their idea, they can persuade others, they can clearly state what's in their head versus me who start talking code and acronyms, right? That's the default mode of an engineer. And that did it for me. And that was a starting point of a lifelong journey that I don't think will ever stop. The last thing I was learning was improv comedy. So, because I couldn't think of anything better. But, you know, some moments start you somewhere. But at the end, I mean, for me, that was it. Improving my communication skills. And it paid off handsomely.
Great.
I have a similar story, not the email download part, but the communication skills. So if you think about this, to answer your question and connect it back to that, is if we're all different and have different skills, so look and read about, how the skills leaders need to have. Communication is a big one of those, and reflect on how you might want to be able to present. So I have been presenting and talking, for 30 years, but I've never been comfortable with it. So it was a 30-year journey of reading books, getting coaching, and breathing and putting your head between your legs first, or all these different things that you read in order to not feel that nervous feeling, so that when you're talking, you're how do you do that? And I got every time and every technique, and talking to people about it, I would get better and I'd improve, and all of those kind of things. And then I got a really high stakes assignment to communicate. So I was at National University, I was the associate provost, and everyone in leadership, all of the deans, the chancellor, the president, were going to go on a bus tour to the various campuses, and I was going to have to present to all the faculty in all of the regions in front of everyone who evaluated me was my peer and above, the strategic plan, and lead that initiative. So if you're learning through this process, you can go talk to a group of people that you don't know, because you never see them again, and you can practice. But if you're suddenly going to have to do a 3-day bus tour and be on the bus before and after your talk and during your talk, and they're evaluating you, it was an opportunity. In some ways, like you said, it was a sponsorship to do this. So I knew I needed to succeed. So I decided I would get a voice coach. And I got this voice coach in San Diego. I don't know, I can't remember how I found her, but I have a art background, so sometimes I don't like a traditional path, like, here's your voice coach, here's how you talk. So I ended up with this voice coach who was really a singing coach and was a jazz singer and lived in like the artiest part of North Park in San Diego, in this, like, you walk into her house and every room's a different color and there's lights and this and that, and she has a beautiful voice. And she really just changed my life. And she taught me things like this. When you're talking and you're breathing, this is what I'd seen myself on videotape. So I'd be talking, and then I talk some more, and then I talk some more, and I really was like, it's more than I could bear. And she said, well, that's really easy to fix. You just have to breathe through your knees. And so I pass that on to all of you. But she had a way of connecting your body to the work that you did. And, you know, I can't sing, and I'm not a singer, but with her I could vocalize and do singing, and I was able to relax into what I did, and so that I could go on that bus trip and make a difference. So then fast forward 5-6 years, I'm applying to be president of John F. Kennedy University, and I know that, you know, I've been told, and you talk about feedback, I've been told, Deborah, you know, people can't hear you, and, you know, these old guys in the room, they're probably losing their hearing, but they can't hear you. And so I'm like, okay, so it's time to go back to my voice coach. By this time, she's moved to New York, and so everything has to be at Skype. So luckily I know the breathe through my knees thing, because I don't know if I could have learned that over Skype. So she begins working with me and on that and pushing the envelope on that. But she says, you really have to go see someone else. You have to go see someone who knows the Alexander technique. So I'm like, okay. So I find the person she tells me to go to. It's in Encinitas, probably even more arty than North Park was. And this woman is there, and she's got 3 little rooms, and she's got like skeletons, you know, like skeletons, plastic skeletons, big ones, little ones, and she's got 3 different rooms. And she starts talking about, you know, how you move your body and how everything pivots from here, and she shows you on the skeletons. And she said, when you walk in a room, if you're not doing this, if you're doing this, everyone's just looking at your head. But if you can relax into your body and let your body move, a couple of things happen. People don't know what's going to happen next, because you're not doing this. You could be like jump up and run across the room, and so they want to watch you because they want to know what you're doing. And then also she said, this is part of the leadership piece. So you make people feel comfortable if you're comfortable, and then their bodies start feeling comfortable, and then they connect with you, and then what you say. I won't, she says what you say doesn't matter. I don't think that's true. I think what you say matters a lot. But at least you have people's attention, you make them feel relaxed, you become one with them. So that happened 6 months ago. So I would say that I've taken this lifelong journey. So when you ask what do, leadership, I think, is all about self-reflection, knowing yourself as well as you can, having a vision for what you think you have to offer, and how do you get there, how do you communicate it, and how do you just keep pushing that envelope so you can be the best person you can be to give back and help others. So, you know, I think I have a list here of the 5 things I think you should do, but I don't really think, after talking and having this conversation with all of you, that that's really what you need to hear. It's for you.
Great, thank you.
We have time? Okay. I was going to say, Deborah, similar experience. I decided that.
We all breathe through our knees up here.
Well, I want to say I failed miserably, though. You know, I had the same issue. I decided that I'm going to go ahead. It was a theater class. It was called voice production. So that, you know, I had same issues, breathing, communicate, still do, talking too fast. So I said, well, I'll take this theater class, you know, so you're projecting your voice and whatever. I failed miserably. So I said, I have to go to the other plan. So that didn't quite work out for me. I decided I'll just do it myself because, you know, it was a graded course, and I must admit I got a D, and I don't ever got a D in my life. I decided theater wasn't for me, or voice production. Going back to the original question on the early on stuff, and I had to think about that, and part of what prepared me for a leader, and there was a question about being born or learned. This was more, I assume, a born issue for me. I was always a contrarian. I was willing to challenge everything. My nickname in high school was not necessarily so. I would tell my instructors that all the time. They would go to class and say, well, not necessarily so, and make the argument against that or whatever from my perspective as a little high school kid trying to argue with teachers, but that's what I would do. And as I got through college and going on, I was always looking for gaps and willing to challenge them. And it wasn't from a perspective that this is my boss, this is, you know, who I'm challenging. It was, there's a gap, there's a different perspective, usually mine. And I was always thinking mine was correct, and it wasn't always correct, but I decided I would go from there. It was just a willingness to challenge, identify gaps, and it helped me through my career. I was there, as a frontline employee, what about this? Or not necessarily so. And that's what helped me get to where I am, just that willingness to challenge and learning the skill set to articulate what that gap is and having a solution. That old don't come with a problem without a solution, and that was part of the thing to do is like, if you're going to challenge it, here's another way to do it. Your way is not necessarily right, so let's talk about this particular way.
Exactly. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And with time constraint, I want to just go ahead and ask for our panelists to kind of give their closing remarks and to tell us what advice would you give to us who may be assuming a leadership role or who will happen to be approaching or fall into a leadership role that they probably didn't anticipate. But what advice would you give those individuals in their careers going forward? And so I'll ask for our president to start us off.
I think the fact that you are all here and that the class has come together and wanted to hear about leadership means that you're already on your path to be leaders. I started off by saying, we're leaders in our life in any way, so in every way and in every situation. So my advice would be for you to consider that. Consider how you are a leader in your everyday life. I know we have some young students with us today, and I am sure that they're leaders with their friends and in their classrooms and in their neighborhood. So find ways and opportunities for you to exercise your leadership. Leadership is a discipline. There's a lot written about it. A lot of people consider it. Find out the way that works for you and go forward with that and continue on the path that I know you've already started.
Great, thank you.
And I also agree with Deborah. One of the things that I would add there is, one, and they talked about authenticity, is being yourself, being honest, understanding who you are, and developing the skills around who you are as a leader. There are specific skill sets that are required of a leader. Be who you are and learn those particular skill sets. It can be done academically as well as through experience. And also I would say is develop a feedback loop. Someone, she talked about sponsors, somewhere that you're getting feedback, someone you can talk to, someone you identified as a good leader. These are traits that I like as a leader, and do your best to attach yourself to that person. And if you can't, is to watch them and learn to model your behavior after them.
I think I'll add to the two things that they said, and that's sort of take inventory. And what I mean by that is you have the self-reflection, if you have the 360 feedback, and you're capturing what you have as strengths and weaknesses, include identifying resources. And that includes people, the books, or other avenues that help you to grow and develop. Because we talked about that people business, and that's a non-stop thing. You're going to encounter so many different kind of people in the course of a leadership experience. So I would definitely say you have to stay hungry for those resources that help you to get better so you can show up every day.
I love the statement Barbara made that we are in the people business. And people are complex.
Yeah.
It's very hard to master. The moment you thought you figured that out, it's different in a different situation. Same people behave differently under different circumstances. And so I guess that curiosity, learning, always be learning. There's so much to learn. And if you, I don't know where I saw this, but I read a lot. I mean, I go through 15 to 20 books a year. And sometimes I reread books because every time you read them, you learn something new. And it's just amazing. I mean, there's one book, Mindset, by Carol Dweck. I don't know if you heard of that book. It's just one book in your life to read that book. Mindset. I would say that has changed my life, the way I see things. And we are all made to be who we are. Even we may have exhibited some characteristics early on in our life, they were the result of some encouragement. You know, you tell your kid like, oh, that's a beautiful painting you made. Next time they do it more and more and more. And every skill is a learned behavior. Every skill in life, everything you do today, everything that you know today is a learned behavior. And there is so many more to learn. And if you take that life skill inventory as a circle, there's a small sliver that you know. And there's a small sliver on the both side of that sliver that you know that you don't know. There's a whole huge pie that you don't even know that you don't know. And it's only when you start getting into that mode of learning, you discover new things every day. Learning, it will pay off. One thing I want to mention is something that I get often, especially those who are starting out in the career. People view that I've been at a certain place for a certain number of years. Jeremy and I were talking about this earlier, that, oh, after 3 years, I need to be this. After that, I need to be that. I'm going to grow into this role. By the next 20 years, I've mapped it up. I'm going to be the CEO of the company. And a lot of them, people ask, hey, why am I not promoted? Why didn't I get the promotion? Why didn't I do that? Number one thing is like, what have you done to show that you're ready to take on that role? Have you learned everything that you need to do to be in that role? Because believe me, no matter how much you have learned, the moment you get into that role, there's going to be surprises. There'll be a lot of new things that you didn't even know that existed. So if you want to be a leader, start figuring out what you need to do to be a leader. Every opportunity, like Deborah said and Barbara said earlier, every opportunity you get, start acting like a leader. Take responsibility, take charge, take ownership, and leadership will come naturally.
Great, thank you. So within closing, I would like to first of all thank our panelists. I hope there was something said tonight that you will be able to take away as a nugget to grow and to continue on with your studies, with life, within your careers. One thing I always tell my students is that you're here for a reason. You have a desire, you have a dream, and a passion to follow. We're here to help our students to get that toolbox together, help them to put those tools in, and this is one avenue to do that, is to give them that experience. We give the concepts, we give the knowledge in the classroom, but when we get out there in real life, we're not going to have that textbook with us when we're faced with those situations. So this is an opportunity that we love to have, and hopefully we can continue on in the future to bring in those real world experiences, to be able to apply them immediately so that when each student leaves, not only do they have that piece of paper, but they also have that toolbox and that they're ready at hand. So with that being said, we have thank you gifts for our panelists. And also, we also have a reception, so there's light snacks and beverages in the back. Feel free to network with our panelists and with each other. We have a book list also of leadership books as well that are outside in the front. So again, we want to thank everyone for coming, thank our panelists, and have a good evening.